Today we're going to be continuing in our study of Hebrews 11, and this is going to be part 2 of a 3-parter. And that's because this chapter, Hebrews chapter 11, is probably among the most rich minds that you could find in the New Testament or the Bible for that matter, in terms of things that really matter. This is just a very, very dense chapter, has so much to chew on. And so I didn't want to get indigestion, spiritually speaking, and just kind of blow through it quickly. So we're taking our time. And just as a quick preview of what you'll see today, we're going to talk about the life of Abraham. Abraham, a very important person in the Old Testament. And again, the name of this book is Hebrews, and he was a Hebrew, certainly. But this was written to a group of people originally, this book was, to kind of bridge the gap between what they knew and what they were coming to know. They had lived under a religious system that God had said that was really just pointing to a person that was going to be something better. It was going to be something that would come and complete the understanding, and that's who Jesus is. That's who Jesus was. And yet, at the same time, during this time of transition, from Old Covenant to New Covenant, from Old Testament to New Testament, from old understanding to new understanding, and new insight into things, that's a difficult time. And you know that from your own life, maybe. If it's a time of transition for you, if you're going through changes, well, that can be a very, very difficult time. It can be uncertain because you're really not where you used to be and you're really not where you're going. And so when I think about that, that's kind of what Hebrews was all about. It was about not looking back, but looking forward. It was about not going back to when will things go back to normal, but instead, how can I take what I'm learning now and take them forward into the future. And I can't think of a better time and timing for a book and message than that. But again, Hebrews, the middle part here of chapter 11. I hope you're ready and comfortable for what is ahead, because this is really, really great stuff. Again, I'm broadcasting here from our house, and you'll see from our home in Davidson, and you'll get to see how this is even more relevant in a way to today's message. I think it's great that so many people right now are thinking about their house, or wishing they were there, or wishing they weren't there so much, or whatever else. So again, think about that. It'll be very relevant to today. Lord, thank you for this time. Thank you for your blessings. Thank you for all that you do every time we turn our eyes, hearts, and minds to you, and pray that we would do that now in Jesus' name. Amen. Well, I am a fortunate person because I have a very homey home. And really the main person that I have to thank for that is Lynn, my wife, because she takes any house and would make it a home. Now, we happen to really like our neighborhood, like our neighbors, like our town that we live in. But the truth is, we've lived in all kinds of places, and everywhere we went, it always was home to me. And when I think about that, I couldn't wait to get home. And to this day, I am that guy who, wherever I am, I'm thinking, well, this is nice, but I'd like to be home. And when I think about what that means, to have a home, to have a place, that's what this chapter is all about figuring out what our home is. And what people love to do is ask people where they're from, right? If you're talking with a person, you're meeting them for the first time, or you're getting to know them a little better, a lot of times you'll say, well, where are you from? And they'll say, well, I'm from Davidson's. Yeah, but where are you from originally? Because, they'll pick out an accent or something. And so at least for me, I guess I would say, if someone were to ask, where are you from? My answer can be many different things. Sometimes I say, well, I'm from Miami. But that's not really true. I'm not from Miami. I'm from Boulder, Colorado. But that's not really true. I'm actually, before that, we were from Texas. And that's not really true, because before that, I was, born, I guess, over in Utah. And so, my dad was Air Force. And even after he left the Air Force, we moved around a lot, and so I think about that. I have many mental homes. Maybe I should be in a mental home. But you know what I'm saying is that I have many places that I would call home. And at the same time, I have no place that I would really say, no, this is it. This is my definitive home. Because again, I'll tell someone I'm from North Carolina, but I'm really from Miami, 305 for life, and that's where a lot of our friends still are. And then if I were to go home to Colorado, I would walk there and I don't know that I'd even run into a person that I recognized or who would recognize me, If I went to homecoming at my high school or if I went to homecoming at any of the schools that I went to after high school, I don't think any of them would say, oh, hey, we're glad you're here. The one thing that they do track me down on is, their annual giving campaign. So I try not to have them have my home address or at least, a home address several addresses back. But again, as an introduction, as a thought, there are many things that make a place a home, but I titled today's talk, This is Not Our Home. This is not our home. Because I think it's really important to realize that nowhere on earth is going to be really a place that is going to say, now this feels right. See, this is a place where I can kick up my feet and just say everything is great all the time. Because frankly, nowhere on earth is like that. And it wasn't designed to be like that. And so if you think about what the book of Hebrews is going to talk about, it's going to talk about the idea of, this being at best a temporary place. Even at its best, it can quickly turn to its worst. And we have to ask ourselves, if I anchor my hope to this home here on earth, to some place or some, certain position and the way things are, then I'm going to have a homeland insecurity. I'm going to always have an insecurity that comes from the fact that, well, what if I lose this? Or what if I don't have this? Or what if I have to move? Or what if things move and I have to do something different? Well, of course, that's always going to be the case. And so again, as I titled today, Hebrews chapter 11, verse 8 through 19, the middle section of this great chapter, this is not our home. And so I hope you'll wherever you are, whether you're home or somewhere else, think on some of these thoughts. So picking it up there in verse 8, this is Hebrews chapter 11, verse 8. It says, by faith Abraham, again, I remind you, we were going to talk about this guy Abraham and his family lineage. It says, when he was called to go to a place he would later receive as his inheritance, he obeyed and went, even though he didn't know where he was going. Now, one of the things I love about this chapter is, again, it's talking about what it is to be a person of faith, what it looks like, and it's looking at so many of the lives that went on before ours, great names in the hall of faith, right? The people who did it so well, and that God says, well, look at this example. Look at this example. This is what faith really looks like, practically speaking. And, the hall of faith would be completely incomplete without the life of Abraham. I mean, he is referred to over and over in the scripture as the father of the faith. And so when you think about this is a guy who knew a little bit about what it was to walk by faith. And one of the first things he knew with it is, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know where I'm going. I am basically got one foot in front of the other, and I've got a little bit of instruction, and I've got a little bit of detail, and I might see the next step kind of vaguely, but I don't really know where I'm going. And so I wrote down that faith means going without knowing. Again, it's not a leap in the dark, it's a leap in the light, but nevertheless, faith is an acknowledgement of how little I know. And, it's funny, I think sometimes that people think that faith turns you into a know-it-all. Well, I know this and I know that, and here's my opinion on this and here's my perspective on that. You know what? The longer I've walked by faith and the more I look, I think, at the people who walk by faith in the scripture, it authorizes me to say, I don't know. What do I know? I don't even know where I'm going. What's your 10-year plan? Don't have one. Don't know if I have 10 years. So, don't know if I have 10 minutes. Now, it doesn't mean that I don't think ahead, because the scripture does say, use your head, think ahead, right? And I do. And Abraham did. And when God told him to go, he did. He was a guy who had already settled the issue that if God says move, I'll move. If God says stay, I'll stay. And so sometimes when people ask me, do you think you'll stay in Davidson? I'm like, I don't know. I hope so. I like it. It's very homey. I like it here. I like the people here. I like the place. I just really love so many things about it. I miss some things about other places I've been. I'd love to go back to some of those. But again, when I think about it, I go, well, I don't know. I don't know. I guess God knows, He brought us here, and I'd love to think that He'll bring us to our home in heaven directly from here someday in the future. But I also kind of go, what do I know? I didn't know that this was part of my future. When I was in Colorado, I wasn't thinking, Davidson, yeah, that'll work out. Or, hey, I think I'll go to Miami. Miami, I've never been there. Never thought of it. And so when I think about what living by faith is, there's an adventure to it of, you say, I really don't know. I really don't know. And it's okay to go without knowing. It's okay to go without knowing. And if you wait to know to go, you're never going to go. If Abraham had waited for all the facts before he'd made any acts of faith, he would have not had any idea what he was doing. And so when I think about that, this is something we can learn from Abraham, that part of faith is just the fact that I don't know what the future holds. I don't. I have no idea. And I can freely acknowledge that. I can embrace that. I can even get excited about that I have no idea what's around the corner. And so by faith, it says going on there, think about this. By faith, he made his home in the promised land like a stranger in a foreign country. He lived in tents, as did Isaac and Jacob, those are his descendants, who were heirs with him of the same promise. Now, here's what I love about this. He didn't know where he was going, but he did get there. I mean, God had said, I'm giving you a promised land, and that land will be the land of Canaan, and I'm giving it to you and your descendants. And he's like, I don't have any descendants. He says, yeah, that's some more pages ahead in your story. But when you think about what that means, he went without knowing, but he didn't go, and God knew the things that were coming ahead. So God was able to promise him things that he just said, well, I don't know how that would happen, or I don't see exactly how that will happen, but this is what he did. He did actually go there, and he did set up a life there. He said, well, I am just a passing through, but I haven't passed away yet, so I'm going to, I'm going to make it my home. I'm going to make it my home. And again, just stopping there real fast, I think about this. My wife, again, one of the things that I have so enjoyed is that she just makes places better. When we come into a spot, we've even been to hotels, where when we walked into the hotel room, it was like, yeah, it's probably a 3-star. And by the time she had rearranged a few things, it was like, this is like a 4-star hotel, 5-star even. I mean, wow, that lamp is a lot better over there. They should put it over there. She just has a capacity to see things, as they are, but as they could be. And, it's not just in the physical that's true. I so admire that aspect of her spiritual life, that she's able to see things that might be, things that could be, things that God has promised to be down the road. And, that's one of the reasons so many people like being around her, and people like her because it says, by faith, this Abraham guy made his home in the promised land. And he's like, hey, looking good. And it's like, no, it's not. It's not looking good. Not yet. And it says he lived in tents. Don't you love this? I wrote this down. I like to play with words, but I thought this one was funny. My intent is to live in tents, but live in tents. And what I mean, metaphorically speaking, is, hey, I'm not just like moseying through life, right? Like, well, there's always next year, because there isn't always next year. I don't know if there's next tomorrow. So what I do is I try to live with some urgency on, hey, I ought to do this now because now's what I got, right? And at the same time, there's a peace that can hit my life when I realize I may or may not get to do that. I may or may not get to do that now. Because see, you think about Abraham. Abraham lived like he was an heir to a promise that only his heirs got the real promise, but even they didn't. It says it right there in the verse, right? In verse 9, it says even Jacob and Isaac didn't get to see the full story. I still haven't seen the full story, even though I'm a now child of Abraham all these years later. You know, Abraham's great, whatever grandson. But I look at it and go, yeah, I inherited promises that God made to Abraham, but Abraham didn't get to see all of it. And guess what? I'm not going to get to see all of the impacts or all of the outflows from my life. And so he lived as a stranger in a place that he said, well, you know what? I'm always going to be a stranger here. I'm always going to be a pilgrim here. I'm always a foreigner, even in the place that God said, that's your home base. He says, well, sort of. So I love the fact that my intent, I can actually live in this intentional tension, right? Where I go like, home. But I might have to move tomorrow. And that's okay because I wasn't too attached. I mean, I got kind of attached, but you know what? Here's one of the things that I've done. And if you've never done it, man, do it sometime. Go to a place where somebody that you've cared about is no longer there. And look around and realize, wow, all this stuff is still here and they're not here. And things are right where they left them. I think about this just very ironic and bizarre thing right now, which is, our youngest daughter went off to college and then she came back from college, early because of the pandemic. And that's not rare these days. It happened to a lot of people. But what's interesting about it to me anyway, is that it just happened to be that they came home from spring break thinking that it was a 1 week, temporary trip back home, and all of the stuff that she values most was taken to her dorm room, right? So she left only her least favorite clothes, least favorite everything here at home, and took the best stuff off to the dorm room. Well, all that stuff is now just sitting there in that dorm room locked, and we can't get to it. They still haven't let us back on campus, And so when I think about that place, walking into that is going to be like a weird moment when we finally get to. It's going to be like a time capsule. It's like if you left food, sitting there, it's going to sprout it into a plant, right? And when I think about that, it's to live with some intent that, man, there is an intensity to life, man. There is an urgency to what's going on. But I realize that no matter how much I get done here, I'll never get it all done here. No matter how much I do here and accomplish here, this is like a drop in the bucket compared to eternity. And so there are things that are only going to get seen, only get accomplished, only get done in eternity. See, I think about it this way. I'm like, oh man, I have a bucket list, right? I have things that I'd like to do before I die. But if I die before I do those things, who cares, right? On some level, I'm on to better things. I'm on to bigger things. My bucket list will look pretty stupid, to be like, oh, I wanted to go to Australia. And it's like, oh, you did? Well, gosh, you could pop on over to Australia right now if you want. You're not bound by time. You're not bound by a body anymore. And you go like, how cool is that? So Abraham lived with a faith that the best was yet to come anyway. And so he put down stakes in the ground, but they were tents. And so I want to live with that idea that, I'm kind of intense. Life matters. But then on the other hand, it really doesn't matter. It doesn't matter where I live. It doesn't matter what I have. It doesn't matter if I have a nice or not so nice house because, hey, I'm just a passing through. And so you see hats behind me, and that's because whenever I go outside, I've spent so much time in the sun that I can't spend any time in the sun anymore. And so the doctor said, if you want to stay above ground instead of under it. You got to shade yourself some more. But I love going out. I love taking walks. I love going places. And, one of the walks that I remember most in my life was a crazy walk that I took. It's probably a bad idea. Like so many of the best experiences I've had have been born out of stupidity. But I was actually on a business trip, and my hotel happened to be right by a beach. But there was like a walk out to the beach, but it was unlit, right? And this was back before phones, so I didn't have like a phone or a flashlight or anything. And I thought the lighting was pretty good around the hotel. And so I started this walk, and then I went off a little path, and all of a sudden I was on this area where I really couldn't see anything except seriously the step in front of me. And so I stepped in front of me and went down these long stone steps, and just one at a time. And I was like, I don't have any idea really what's going on, but I could hear the beach toward the end of it, right? And I came out around this corner, and there was just this cove and this amazing scene. And I was like, you know what? If I had needed to see every step, or if I'd said, well, I can't see every step, I better turn back, I would have missed that amazing moment. Now, again, that could have been something that other people would be reading about and say, yeah, some stupid tourist walked off the end of a cliff right into the water. And those things do happen. And I'm not advocating a life of, carelessness. But on some level, my intent is to live intensely, because I live in a tent anyway. I mean, this is all temporary. Everything I see, I can't hold on to it. I can't take it with me unless it's the faith and reality that Abraham lived in. He said, well, here I am in the promised land, but, it's kind of like the land I left. It has problems too. And so think about this. Here's what it says about Abraham. He was a stranger in a foreign land, even when he was in his hometown, because he wasn't home yet. See, it says he was looking forward. He was looking forward to the city with foundations, whose architect and builder is God. What's it talking about there? Well, it's talking about heaven. It's talking about eternity. It's talking about the place where Jesus said, hey, I go and prepare a place for you. In my Father's house, there are many mansions, and there's a spot for you. And you're going to find that that restlessness that you had here on earth, where you said, like, maybe if I move here, maybe if I move there, I'll be happy. And you go, well, I moved here and I found that my problems went with me, right? Maybe I'm the problem. Maybe I can't move away from me, right? And I think about this so many times. My parents had a really cool cartoon back on the fridge of their home when I was growing up, in my childhood home. And it had a cartoon bubble over the United States, and each one of the states had a bubble coming out of it with a dialogue box saying, let's move somewhere else. And it really is true. I've seen it with people that we move somewhere else and we think this is it, But this is what Abraham did, is he said, the point of the journey wasn't that I'd get to the promised land. It was that I'd get to the promised life, that I would get to the place where I was knowing that even though I didn't know where I was going, I knew that I was going with God, and I was going because God said so. And, I think about the many places we've lived, and one of the coolest experiences we ever had was we moved from Miami to a suburb of Miami, or an outskirt of Miami, a place called Homestead. And we did that to start a church. So we moved from a church to start a church, right? A church family. And as we were stepping out to do that, it was 30 miles away to the south or something like that, 30 minutes. And we had a friend who said this verse to us. He said, yeah, you're going to plant a church in Homestead, but just remember there's a home instead, right? There's another home instead that you'll still be looking for him. You'll go there and there'll be good and bad and ugly. And there was. But I love the fact that he gave us this thought and said, it's really the city with foundations whose architect and builder is God. That's what we're working toward. And if you're going to Homestead to plant a church, the point of that is to populate heaven, right? The point of that is to take people with you on your faith journey. And we got to do that. And many friends still today, that we've all gone to different places, different homes, different spots, different countries even, and some even on to eternity who've died already, who we knew in those times. And yet I look at that and I say, you know what? But we built something then. We built something that we realized even what we built was temporary. See, we started that church and then we unstarted that church and went over and merged in with another church. And then we left that spot and we came here and we did things with people. And then we're here. And you know, it's funny. I just the other day, I looked at it and it made me laugh because on a power strip that I'm using right over there, right, that I can see, it had the name of Calvary Homestead. You know, it's a property of Calvary Homestead. And you say, oh, did you steal it from that church? No, I bought it and gave it to that church all those years ago. But I brought it with me everywhere I've gone. And so here it is, still serving Glass House to Go, right? But it doesn't really matter what the name on it is. What matters is that hopefully I'm looking forward. I'm looking forward to the city that I'll live in forever. The city with foundations whose architect and builder is God. It's the best city ever. The best city planner, right? And so I wrote it down this way. Faith looks and lives forward. See, it's very tempting to live your life looking backward and saying, oh, you know, those were the good old days. Or, I liked that so much. And sometimes I will reminisce with some friends or my wife or even our kids or whoever about, the homestead days, man. Oh, those were great. Oh, the Kendall years. Those were amazing. You know, but here in North Carolina, woo, you know, all that. And you go, yeah, there were good and bad and ups and downs to all of that. But looking forward, it's so important to live forward, because if I think my best days are behind me, then I'm going to always be looking over my shoulder saying, I wish I could go back. Well, I don't wish I could go back. I wish I could go forward. I wish I could take all of the lessons I've learned through all those things and someday just bring the best of all those people and all those places to a place. And you go, yeah, Scott, you're describing heaven. Oh, you mean like my mom will be there? Yeah. You mean is it going to be better than Boulder? I don't know. Could it be? Yeah, it could be. It's going to be better than San Antonio. You go, wow, San Antonio was awesome, man. The Tex-Mex wasn't like fake Tex-Mex or fake Tex or fake Mex. It was amazing. Better than that? Better than that. The bike trails here in North Carolina are so great, you know. Better than that? Yeah, better than that. London. I got to live in London for a year. I called, you know, Hyde Park home, you know. That's in a very nice place. These are £1 million flats way back in the 80s, you know. And you go, better than that? Yeah, better than that. You just go, wow, man. Faith looks and lives forward. I'm looking and living forward, I hope. And whenever I start looking back, this is what happened with the Israelites, right? The Hebrews knew this. In the Old Testament, they were wanting to get out of Egypt, and then they got out of Egypt and they said like, oh, we wish we were back in Egypt, you know, because they had selective memory. They remembered the best parts of Egypt, but they forgot that Egypt had gypped them, had ripped them off of so much of their life. There was a slavery there. And yet, you know, it's funny how we can look to the future and see the worst, and we can look to the past and remember the best. But, you know, this is what faith does, is it says, I'm going to live and look forward. I've got things to do. I'm still here. I've got things to do. And see, this is exactly what was happening in the New Testament book of Hebrews. And this is why it's so important, is that they had lost their homes, many of them, because of their newfound faith, right? They found faith in Jesus, and not everyone was excited. They got kicked out of their businesses. They got dumped out of places. They got treated and mistreated so poorly in their homeland, in their hometown so often. They were ashamed to their parents or something because sometimes their faith or their trust had changed from the religious systems and the traditions that everyone thought were there. And they said, no, I'm going to find and live the truth as I now know it. And as they were doing that, there were a lot of people saying, go back. You got to come back home. You got to come back to what you know. And they were saying, no, don't do that. You know, don't do that. You've got to go forward. And again, when I think about that, there are so many who would say, I want to go back to the way things were. I never want to go back to the way things were. Oh, I hope I can take the best of the way things were and take those into the future. But frankly, each one of our homes that we've lived in, we've actually learned things from each one of them. We've actually done things differently in each one of them and learned our lessons. And I think about that, even if I live in a smaller place, sometimes that's exactly what I learn is I'm like, I don't want bigger and bigger and bigger. Bigger is not bigger and better. Sometimes smaller and simpler is better. I had to learn that. I had to learn that sometimes by getting everything I want. And it was everything I wanted. And it might have been a nightmare to anyone who might care. But faith looks and lives forward and says, like, what did I learn from that? What can I take from that? What can I go forward with from that? And so look at verse 11. It says, by faith, even Sarah, who was past childbearing age, was enabled to bear children because she considered him faithful who had made the promise. Maybe at some point, Abraham had promised to her, hey, we're going to have kids someday, baby. Don't you worry. If she considered him the source of the promise, Abraham, well, Abraham's ability to make good on any promise was waning quickly and gone, really. See, I love the him in here because it says she considered him faithful. Abraham wasn't the him. The him was capital him, God. It was God who she had put in that place of the promise. And I wrote it down this way. God puts the pro in promise, right? You might believe in some promise. I might make some promise to somebody and make a promise to my kids. Hey, we're going to live in a better place, or I'm going to take better care of here, or I'm going to do this, or we're going to put in this addition, or we're going to make that change, or we're going to renovate that. But the fact is, I'm an amateur. I'm an amateur at everything I do. And certainly that's one of the reasons I don't make a lot of promises. I kind of live by the idea that it's better to under-promise and over-deliver than over-promise and under-deliver. Because it's really easy for me to make a promise to somebody, but the truth is, even if with my best desire, may not be able to follow through with that. But by faith, it says Sarah, she was past childbearing age. She's like, okay, if there was ever a likelihood, if you were going to look at a chart, likelihood of Abraham and Sarah having kids, okay, likely, less likely, getting very unlikely, not really likely at all, extraordinarily unlikely, darn near impossible. That's where it had gotten to that point. And she said, yeah, but it wasn't really me making a promise. It wasn't really a doctor making a promise. It wasn't my husband making a promise. It was actually that God had promised us something was going to happen. And God has a way of putting the pro in promise. He's been at it a long time. If he does it, he's going to do it. If he makes a promise, he's going to follow through with that. Now, again, it may not be in the way that I thought or on the day that I thought or, even in my lifetime. There's going to be things that I'm going to see the promise performed from heaven. I'll go like, wow, you really did do what you said you would do. That's a different way than I would have done it. That's a different way than I would have ever imagined you doing it. And so think about this. Abraham, Sarah, they did have a child. And not only that, but they had children from those children and descendants from those. And again, the point of Hebrews, the point of the New Testament is that anybody, whether related to them by blood lineage, are now related to them by the blood of Jesus, by the fact that Jesus grafted by grace anyone, whether Hebrew or not. It says Jesus made a promise that both those who were of the physical lineage of Abraham, but he said not really that, of the faith lineage of Abraham, who believed God's promises like God made promises to Abraham. He said, in you all peoples will be blessed. Not all peoples who are Hebrew. It says all peoples will be blessed. People who understood that and people who didn't. And so I think about this. It says, from this one man, Abraham, he as good as dead, came descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky and as countless as the sand on the seashore. Now, I've stood at the seashore and tried to count the sand and tried to count the stars. And I can tell you, I ran out of numbers, right? I ran out of, wait, did I already count that one? Hold on. I lost count. So I think about that. This is what he's saying. He's saying beyond and above and impossibly huge are the promises of God. God puts the pro in promise. And I wrote it down again this way. God can bring good out of good as dead. Now, I don't know what's good as dead in your life, you know. Maybe it's a dream you had. Maybe it's an idea you had. Maybe it's energy that you had. You said, I'm just good as dead on that. Maybe it's an avenue that you thought was going to be open. Maybe it's a business that you thought was your purpose in life and all that kind of stuff. And sometimes God will good as dead or even dead something so that we understand, you know what, it's really something else that God was trying to do there. I can't tell you how many times some dream that I've dreamed has died and something else has opened up. A door that I thought was going to be wide open for life has slammed shut only to find that windows flew open. And when I think about those thoughts, they're uncomfortable. They're super uncomfortable. I don't like them any more than anyone else likes them. I'm sure being good as dead didn't feel very good to Abraham. And if, he didn't read this, it came along, but from heaven, he'd look and go, oh, come on, you got to say that? Is it true? Yeah, dude, you were like good as dead, man. You were like, you were done, man. You were like one foot in the grave and the other foot on a banana peel, bro. I mean, you were not doing so great. But he says, but great things came out of your life at that point. And I think about that. And you say, God loves to look at those things and say, well, that's good as dead. And you go, but God can bring good and life out of good as dead. So don't ever count God out just because you count yourself out. And look at this. All these people, it's talking about the Hall of Faith people. It's talking about not just Abraham, but the names we're going to see next week, the names we saw last time we were together, the names you'll see all throughout the Bible. It says all these people were still living by faith when they died. They didn't receive the things promised. Now, think on that for a moment. They didn't receive the things promised. You can put in parentheses, in the way they thought or the day they thought. They only saw them and welcomed them from a distance, admitting they were foreigners and strangers on earth. See, I don't know about you, but there's so many people who misunderstand faith. I've misunderstood it at times, and maybe I still do at times. But I wrote it down this way. Don't let your faith die before you do. And what I mean by that is there's a lot of people who say, like, God has my lifetime to get everything done that he'd promised to do to me in my lifetime. And you go, no, he doesn't. He has all time to get done what he said he would do. So it says right there, all these people were living by faith when they died. It's like, hey, Abraham, you believe in this will happen? Yeah. And he died. So physically, he died with dreams still alive in his life. He died with things unaccomplished physically still in his life. And it says each one of them did that. People believed right up until the moment of death that God was going to come through on this. And he goes, I believed. Ooh. And you go, but they believed up until that moment. And I think about this. My body will die someday. Might be today, won't be yesterday. Although, yesterday was a day I could have. And it's funny how many things I've done in my life where I've thought, well, this is it. This is it. I'm a goner. And I've gone on from that point. And I think about those things. I call it the gator godder syndrome. And I don't want to be insensitive. I don't want to be, callous. I'm not. But I do think about these things, and I think we should. I think we should take them very seriously. I read a news story. One of the homes we called home was Miami. And one of the things about Miami is it has real live gators, not at the zoo, right? I mean, there are alligators. One of the places we lived had lots of lakes and stuff. And this was when we had young kids and things. And it said the gators are real and they are not tame. Okay. Just when you think about that, these are not, animatronics, and they are not, props. They're like gators. And I read a story, it happens all the time, but I read a story just the other day in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic, in the moment of so many fears, so many things that people are going through, so many difficulties that people are going through. A woman was attacked and killed by a gator. And I was thinking to myself, I can almost promise you, I didn't know her. I am deeply grieved when I read things like that. I really am. But I looked at the news and I said, I know this. That lady did not wake up thinking, I'm going to be gotten by a gator today. She might have feared an illness she was having. She might have read the news and been afraid that she was going to get a virus or anything else. And yet, the gator got her. And so I think about how many times in life you might think something's going to get you and it doesn't, and you'll think something won't get you and it does. But this is what it says. All these people were still dying in faith. They died in faith. Their body didn't outlive their faith. And I think about how important that is. Don't let your faith die before you do. I'm hoping that I believe that I'm going to be cured right up until the moment I'm not, or that I go hey, I'm going to be cured because, hi, Jesus, it's good to see you. And so I think about that, how important it is to go through life that way, how much that changes things. See, people who say such things, this is what it says there, people who say such things show they're looking for a country of their own. If they'd been thinking of the country they'd left, they would have had opportunity to return. See, what it's saying there is people who talk like this, and, as I'm talking like this, I'm saying I'm not really homesick for here. I'm sick a little bit of this being my home, and I'm looking forward to heaven. I really am. Again, don't want to rush that process any more than God's plan for my life. But I look at it and say, you know what? I'm kind of sick of this place sometimes. I look at certain things and I go man, that's just ridiculous. I look at the news and I see things going on that, I just go, this place is sick, man. And I think about this. Isn't it funny that people get, they talk about cabin fever, they talk about being, oh man, I'm so sick of being stuck in my house. If you're away from your house, you're oh, I can't wait to get home. And then you're home and you're home too long and you're, oh, I can't wait to get out of here. It's like a prison, and people push back on that and they do, man, there's a lot of people who would love the home that you're stuck in. And you go, yeah, I know all that, but you understand that we are inherently dissatisfied, right? Doesn't matter whether you're in a celebrity mansion or if you're in, a true cabin or something less than that. You just go, we are inherently, as humans, dissatisfied. The Bible says we're going to do that. But satisfied people show they're looking for a country of their own. They're like, yeah, are you from the United States? Well, yeah, kind of temporarily. And again, I love this country, but this is not my country. I'm a citizen of a different place. I'm a citizen of eternity. I've been outside this country and I've seen some places that I go man, I would love to not come here again. And then I've been places where I go, oh, you know what? If they kick me out of the United States, I would definitely I hope they kicked me here. This place is great, and there's people from the United States who think it's the only great place in the world, and you go, it's not. It's not. There are great, great, great places in this world. But none of them are that great. And people who say such things show that they're looking for a country of their own. What you looking for, Scott? Well, I'm looking for the place that's ahead, not the place that's behind. If I'd wanted to go back to any of these places, I can go back to them. I go, oh, I just miss Miami so much. Well, fine, go back. Have you ever seen people who say that to people, to the halfbacks, as they call them, who someone leaves New York and then they go to Miami and then they go halfway back and they're here somewhere in North Carolina or something. And they're, oh man, I missed the pizza in New York. Well, then go back. No, I don't want to go back. And you go, well, then you understand there's opportunity to return to any place, in most places that you want to go, oh, I just love to go back to, to Colorado. And you go, well, go back, get in a car and go back. Oh, it's not the same. And you're like, well, it's not. There's some things that are better after I left and there's some things that are worse. But if you think about this, I can go forward. See, one of the quotes I love to do, I have lots of friends and friendships that go way back. I have lots of friends that I've known for 20, 30, 40, even now 50 years. I've got some that are coming up on that, friends that go back that far. And certainly my family goes back that far. But I think of, childhood friends. I am friends still with some childhood friends. And whenever I'm introduced and they say, oh, Scott, we go way back. I like to think this. I use this quote all the time. I made it up, I think. We go way back, but we also go way, way forward. See, that's the part I love the most, is that the friendships that I have, they don't have to be end ships, right? Oh, man. Even ended by death. There's some dear, 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 dear friends who are no longer on this earth. Dear, 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 dear family, no longer on this earth. But those things don't have to end if I'm thinking like this, if I'm seeing things this way. We go way, way back, man. We go way, way back. We go 50 years back. That's nothing. And we're going to go 50 years forward. We'll be like, boop. And I got some forever friendships. We go way, way forward, and I'm very excited about that. And so, I think about this sometimes. What home are you homesick for? There's times where, again, my mind goes back to places that I've been before, and I go, oh, man. Ooh, Austin, Texas. Met my wife there. Went to grad school there. totally broke there. Didn't have it 2 nickels to rub together back then. And you go, I don't know, Lake Travis. Yeah, that was nice. But then Lake Davidson's pretty nice. But then, oh man, the lakes back in Colorado were pretty nice. And they go, oh man, but the lake in London was pretty nice. And then you go like, what home am I homesick for? You go, I guess I'm homesick for all of them. Which means I'm kind of homesick for none of them, right? I guess what I'm homesick for is heaven, because if I went back to all those places, I'd be missing the people who aren't in all those places. And there's only one place where all those people are going to be. And that's in the presence of God. And so when I think about that, I go, that's what I'm looking forward to. That's what I'm homesick for. I'm sick kind of all the ways that man, my kids are spread out. Our kids are spread out. My friends are spread out. And I just go, I guess I'm homesick for heaven. I guess that's what I'm looking forward to. And God said that's what I wanted it to be. And I love this because it says instead, look at that was true of them. It says they were longing for a better country, a heavenly one. Therefore, God's not ashamed to be called their God. He's prepared a city for them. I love this. Remember, God puts the pro and promises this is going to be an amazing spot. It's going to be better than the best of here. And maybe you've lived in great places. Maybe you don't find yourself in a great place. Maybe you're looking at a place that you go, no, I'm pretty much, I hate everywhere I've lived. And you go, well, that's fair. I know there are truly people who this life has been just one string of tragedies after another for them. And they find themselves saying, I don't even truly physically have a physical home. I'm a foreigner everywhere I go. I'm displaced. This place is not my home. And you go, well, so often those are the very message where the Bible really hits home to somebody. It says, this was never your home anyway. God's not ashamed to be called your God. See, I live here in Davidson, and it's kind of funny. This is a small town, but it's got at least one big name from here. It's got a few signs in different places of different people. But if I walk just a mile from our house, we walk over to a place called Davidson College. Now, you may not know Davidson College or even know this name, but Steph Curry is a basketball player, and he's a good one. And he's been a good one, and he'll probably be a good one when they get back to playing again. But you walk over by that campus, and they are not ashamed of Steph Curry. There might be some other students, where they go like, didn't they go to Davidson? You're like, yeah, maybe they did. But believe me, the Curry name is not one that brings any shame to Davidson. You go over there and you see, big murals and names and things, and you think about that. He's what's called a hometown hero, right? And I'm probably a hometown zero to all the places I've been, except I think about this. This is what this verse means to me. It says, Scott, you can be a hometown hero to God. If you live by faith here, like here is not your home, but heaven is like your home, and wherever you go here, you're just kind of like, yeah, this is great, but this world is not my home. I'm just a passing through. My treasure's laid up somewhere beyond the blue, you know? I like that song. It says, the angels beckon me from heaven's open door, and I can't live at home in this world anymore. I mean, once I really have an understanding of how short this time is and my time is here and how long eternity is, it's like, I really can't get too settled in this spot. You know, I can't get too, attached to this place. I may not make a name for myself here, but I love the fact that God wouldn't say, Scott, we don't really talk about him around here. I love the fact that Abraham was a name God wasn't ashamed to say, yep, that's my boy. He would look at Sarah and he said, yep, that's my girl. I'm very proud of them. I'm not ashamed to be called their father in heaven. And you know what's great about that is they may not have a lot to look at here on this earth. It says he lived in tents, man. He was a nomad in some way. In his day, people might have even looked at Abraham. Yeah, isn't he that old man, crazy old man over there in the tent? Or Noah, yeah, the old boat builder. Yeah, he's a crazy old dude. There were people maybe ashamed that crazy person came from their town, but God wasn't ashamed to call him God and say, yeah, that's my family there. And look, it goes on to say this, by faith Abraham, when God tested him, offered Isaac as a sacrifice. He who had embraced the promises was about to sacrifice his one and only son. If you don't know this story, you need to go look at it later. It's basically that God promises a son, the son comes, and then God says, oh, hey, Abraham, I need you to take your son there, your only son, Isaac, I need you to take him on up the mountain and just go ahead and sacrifice him to me. You go, what? That would have been one of these things that you go like, if you don't understand this will cause all kinds of discomfort in your life. It certainly would have caused discomfort in Abraham's life, but it's a story. It's meant to show us something. See, I love this because when I first came to actual faith in my late 20s, where I was really getting to know God. I barely knew the Bible, but I was getting to know God. And somebody actually challenged me on this and said, man, the Bible's so messed up. I mean, God told a guy to kill his own son in there. And I was like, well, I don't know. What kind of God would do that? And I'm like, I don't know. And that's the thing. I didn't know. But I know now what this was all about. I mean, remember, he doesn't have him sacrifice his son. This is really important. The test was, what do you believe? Do you believe that the answers are all on this side of the grave, or do you have answers that are from the other side of the grave? See, he was about to sacrifice his one and only son, and I love the fact that the real story on this is that it says God will provide a sacrifice. So Abraham goes up the mountain and God says, don't do it. But you told me to do it. I said, don't do it. I said, be willing to do it. Come this far. But he says, look over there. Actually, don't sacrifice your son. Sacrifice the sacrifice I provided. And see, God provided his one and only son. The wording here is intent. It's intentional. He sacrifices his one and only son. He says he was going to do that. He tested Abraham with Isaac, and he said, I gave you a promise. Do you believe that promise is even stronger than death? Do you believe that promise is bigger than what you see and understand? Do you believe that promise is from the other side of the grave too? And Abraham did. Abraham said, yeah, you'll see. Look, if you keep reading, by faith, Abraham got tested. Even though God said to him, it's through Isaac, your offspring will be reckoned. And so God's wrecking everything about what Abraham had reckoned. And he says, but I'll do it. Abraham reasoned this. God could even raise the dead. And so in a manner of speaking, he did receive Isaac back from the dead. What is this passage saying? It's saying because Abraham believed, hey, God gave me the son when I was good as dead, So if my son is actually dead, the promise isn't dead with it. God will figure it out. God has to figure it out. The consequences of obedience are God's problem. The consequences of disobedience, well, that's my problem. But, if God tells me to do something and I do it and that makes everything fall apart, well, that's God's problem. So he said, I don't really know how it's going to work. I don't know, but I know this. God puts the pro in promise. And if he gave me the son and he tells me to sacrifice the son, the same God who said, I'm going to give you a son when your good is dead, God can do something good even when something's dead. So if he has to resurrect Isaac, I guess he will. And that's where he went, and he just obeyed without all the details. And this is why it's so important, my friends, so important. This is huge to keep listening to God. Keep listening to God. Because what if Abraham had said, no, God told me to sacrifice Isaac, I'm going to do it. And then God says, don't do it. And he says, nope, God told me to do it. He listened at each step. And that's what faith is. Faith is, well, God said this, and God is continuing to teach and talk and show, and I need to listen step by step. Just because I think I heard something 20 years ago doesn't mean I need to say, well, I heard that 20 years ago, and that's my understanding, and that's what I know, and God said it, and that. You go, wait a minute, what is God saying? What has God said? You got to stay tuned. You got to plug in and understand. And that's exactly what Hebrews was. It was very easy for them to say, well, I grew up understanding this truth and this tradition. And the writer of Hebrews says, yes, do you understand what God was trying to do with that? Do you understand that God is now speaking to you through the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus? You go, well, I didn't know about that. He says, well, you know about that now. And see, I wrote this down. I end it with this thought. When heaven is home, life and death is just different. Life is different. Death is different. Both are different. The idea of life and death, it's just different. Someone said, this is a life and death issue. And you go, it is. But see, even death issues for me become resurrection issues. And you go, well, but that's as good as dead. And you go, God can do good things with something as good as dead. No, that's dead. You go, well, God can resurrect dead things. Well, does that mean, Scott, your mom is physically dead? You talked about that last week. You cried about that last week. Yeah, I did. And I'll cry about it again. But here's the point. I believe my mom is alive today. Now, do I get to see her here on earth? Probably not. Extraordinarily not. Probably not. But I'll get to see her again. And this life here is going to go so quickly. It's going to be like a blink in the eye. And that changes the way I live now. I live intent. I live intense. But man, I live in a tent. I realize I could fold this up. I'm living in a tent. The content of my life is eternal. It's eternal. But the tent that I live in is temporary at best. And I've had a great time in this tent. I've had a great time, and I've had a not so great time sometimes. And that's probably true of the future as well, I might have to live in a smaller place. I might have to live in a place where they tell me, no, you go over there. Lunch is 2 times a day, and it's over there. And you go, I don't want to do that. I want to live in my home with some dignity. And you go, yeah, well, we'll see. When heaven is my home, then an assisted living or a rest home or, any of the rest of that, if I go like, I didn't want to leave Davidson. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do that. And you go, well, it doesn't really matter what you want to do, Scott. See, because this is not my home. This is not my home. It's a great place. But it's still just a house. It's still just a house. My wife makes it a home. It's a homey home. But I will leave all this behind sometime. No matter whether I want to or I don't want to. But I'm going toward a better thing. See, I shouldn't get too attached to this place. I shouldn't. I can't. And even if I do, guess what? God has a way of unattaching us from things we're attached to. But the Bible says that that's a good thing. He's going to shake the things that can be shaken so that the things that cannot be shaken remain. And the people who think that way, the people who live that way, can live, die, and resurrect with such a different way. And that's what I would want for me. That's what I want for my family. That's what I want for my friends. That's what I want for strangers, that we would live as strangers here. Because this is a strange place, this world. It doesn't feel right. There's things about it that don't feel right and will never feel right. They'll never be normal. It's never going to be normal here. And so I pray that we'll have the faith that looks forward, lives forward, and believes that God is able to bring good out of the good as dead, if there's good as dead things in your life. But he's able to do even far abundantly more than that. And when I think about that, the thought that I could be a hometown hero in heaven, well, I'll leave with an illustration. This was always one of my faves. It's a missionary story, and missionaries leave their home here on this side of something, and they go somewhere else and call that place home, for a time. And this is a true story, and it was a couple that had served many, many, many years overseas, and they were coming back to their homeland, right? But it was a place they hadn't been for a long time, and they were coming back because their health was starting to fail, and they just simply couldn't continue to serve in the spot that they were. And so they let a number of people know that they were coming back home, and all that kind of thing. And so as they were stepping off the plane, they were coming down the plane, and they saw banners and all kinds of things in a band and some other exciting things going on, and their heart immediately leapt, because they were like, a homecoming for us. People do care that we're coming home. We thought we'd been forgotten, and all this stuff. And then they realized the banners didn't have their names on them. It wasn't for them. It was actually for a band, a rock band that was coming. And these were all the fans and everything of this music group, throwing a party for them, throwing a thing. And so they were like, crestfallen, And the husband there, the missionary, was kind of sad. And he's like, man, we come home and nobody even cares. And I love the fact that his wife had such perspective that she turned to him and said, hey, remember, there's no homecoming for us here because we're not home yet. We're not home yet. And I've thought about that many times in my life, that I'll come to a place, I've gone to businesses that they said, what can we do without you? And then I go back to that business a few years later, and they're asking for my ID, and nobody there recognizes me, and they don't even know what's going on. And you're like, well, I guess I ain't home. You go back to drive by a house that I personally sweat equity that house. Man, I put that thing in. I put that door there. I actually installed that door. And now I'm not welcome through that door. I've gone back to things and I go, but I'm really not home yet. I'm really not home yet. And to realize that I have a builder and maker making a place that's so much better than any place I ever made, or anything I ever built, or anything I ever did. So whether I get to see all of the promises God has made to me or not, I'm someday going to see him from the balcony of a better place, surrounded by people who I had met here on earth and people I hadn't met yet. People like Abraham, and like, hey, Abraham, man, this is pretty cool. He's like, yeah, it's pretty cool, isn't it? Hey, Mom, did you and Abraham got to talk? Yeah. I was over there with Moses just a little while back, and you go, what? Seriously? Yeah, let's go. And I think about that, and you go, oh, Scott, that's crazy talk there. And you go, well, maybe it is. Maybe it is, but God's not ashamed. God's not ashamed to call people who think that way, who live that way, who die that way, and resurrect that way, to call them his child, to call them his hometown hero. So you're not home yet. If you have a great time here, hey, have a great time here. Live in tents, but live in tents, because we may just fold it up anytime. Thank you, Lord. Thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for all the things you've done. I've lived and seen some beautiful places, and the great thought that those are just a foreshadow, just a drop in the bucket. Even my greatest bucket list is just a drop in the bucket of what's ahead for me and for us. And you promised it that way, and you've planned it that way, and you will perform it that way. And whether I see it here, may I welcome it from afar, as those in this chapter did, those who've gone on before us, those who come after me. I pray that they would be able to see in some small way that I was able to walk on the step that I saw and take the next step even when I didn't know where I was going to go next. But I knew you were leading. We pray it in Jesus' name. Amen.